The Next Round, a marketing inspiration podcast.
Hello, and welcome to The Next Round, the AAR podcast about transformation and marketing of some of the UK's most famous brands. I'm your host, Robin Charney. I've been working in marketing and digital for over 20 years and now help other marketeers with their business challenges as the lead consultant for the ecosystem design practice here at AAR. Each episode is a fast-paced conversation with a super smart marketeer sharing the story of their heritage brand, its history, innovation, transformation, and most importantly, its next round. Why heritage brands? Because their journeys are more interesting, richer, and more complex. And frankly, we've all got a lot to learn from them. Today, I am super excited to be chatting to someone who leads marketing at what is perhaps the oldest brand I've had on the podcast to date. This brand can trace its heritage back to 1660. It's been alongside us and protecting us for centuries and is part of the very fabric and history of the UK. I'm really pleased to welcome Nick Terry, CMO for the recruiting group at the British Army. Hey Nick, welcome to The Next Round.
Hi Robin, great to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you. Let me share with you a bit about Nick. As CMO for Recruiting Group, the partnership between the British Army and Capita, Nick is part of the senior leadership team that has transformed Army recruitment, delivered commercial targets, and rebuilt its reputation as an exemplar of public-private sector partnership. Nick is one of the 100 most effective marketers in the UK and has delivered a number of award-winning and really effective campaigns. He's won the IPA Effectiveness Gold and the Marketing Week Masters of Marketing Long-Term Brand Building Excellence Award. The work and turnaround from the Army marketing is some of the most visible and debated work of the last few years. Let's jump in. I'd love it if you could kick us off, Nick, by just setting a bit of context for us around some of the challenges Army recruitment has faced in the last few years. There's been quite a lot of societal changes that have impacted how the Army recruits, hasn't there?
Absolutely. And if we go back in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, we've seen a number of things that have sort of impacted our ability to recruit. We've seen a shrinking youth population. Up until quite recently, we've seen things like employment rising fairly rapidly. And in a very sort of competitive context out in the market, the Army needs to try and attract, I guess, a sort of unfair proportion of those seeking new career challenges. And I guess when I came in 2016, what we found was that applications to join had started to plateau, and we weren't able to kind of cut through in the numbers that we needed to give the Army what they needed in terms of new recruits turning up on day one for basic training. And therefore, we had to sort of undergo a complete reset of our strategy and really build back from the very beginning to create a longer term strategy and approach that would allow us to really attack those numbers that we needed to generate, and to do that consistently over the years, and to really make a step change in that overall marketing performance to try and drive the front end of that whole process.
This is a classic story of a kind of sales and marketing reset in kind of consumer parlance, isn't it? You needed to modernize your offering and to become more attractive to a wider audience. And I'd love to hear, I guess, a little bit about where you started and you know what was the challenge from a marketing point of view, really, to kind of set the context.
Well, I think up to that point, we'd probably been confusing our target audience. We had sort of disparate strands of activity, disparate campaigns, all largely talking to the same kind of people, advertising and marketing all of the different career streams and role types within the Army. So really the sort of two fundamental building blocks of the strategy was a complete overhaul of the target audience and a really robust segmentation exercise to really, map out the whole market, who was up for it, who wasn't. And I guess the first big insight was to really sort of stop targeting the people that were going to join anyway. So for the people that wanted to see all of that, guns and tanks and all of the sort of the combat related stuff, they were already going to join. So hence, we didn't really need to prioritize our marketing spend to that group. It was really the layers below that. So the ones that may be considering it but actually needed a bit more persuading that the army was the right career option for them and it could give them, the best possible career path that they could need. So rebuilding that segmentation, but also then how we express that creatively, creating a new campaign platform that really sort of spoke to this group of people that needed that extra persuasion, that wanted to see something more surprising from the army to get them to reappraise their view of what the army was, what it does, and why it was the right career option for them. And really to move away from, I guess, sort of very rational communication and messaging to something that was much more emotional. What we also found in a very cluttered, competitive space where the market is talking about jobs and skills, and at the time, jobs were very sort of plentiful, we actually had to connect with people through the heart so that they stayed through what is can be a long process, because you've got to go through all of the checks and balances before you're able to start in basic training from the moment that you apply. So for some, it's a very quick process. For others, it can take a little bit longer. So we have to kind of keep people interested and keep people motivated. And that emotional approach was very deliberate at the outset, so that people could really kind of connect with that opportunity and not drop out throughout the process because they're just looking for a job. Any job will do.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm really heartened to hear you talk about creativity so early on in our chat, because to me, it's such a core component of the transition and the change that we've seen. I wanted to talk about the challenge of making that kind of change in an organization like the Army, which has, I'm sure a number of very senior stakeholders who perhaps aren't marketeers and who don't come from a marketing background. So I'd love to hear how you brought people on the journey with you in that leadership team, because, given a brand that has such a long history and such a kind of proud history, I'm sure it wasn't easy to change the way you talk about the Army to a lot of people who have been there their whole careers. How did you do that?
Yeah, and it's not been an easy journey either to get to that point as well. And I think the starting point for us was to have a sort of very clear strategic imperative, if you like, to go down this route. So we had to have the evidence base, to have done our research, done our homework, but also we spent time taking people on that journey as well. We deal with lots of different stakeholders throughout the whole process, right up to ministerial level, and being very clear about the need to do this and the need for a different approach. We had to have that trust there, across all parties to be clear about that and to get the buy-in for that approach as well.
Have you got some tips on how people can? I mean, not everyone has to, I guess, convince a Minister of Defense that their campaign is worthy, but I'd love if you had some advice for others on how to get people on the bus, so to speak.
For me, it's classic storytelling. It's creating a really compelling narrative as to why you're doing this. What's it for? What's it going to achieve? But to really put the sort of full story behind it so people can understand it, make it very clear and easy. Bring it to life as much as possible, use all of the available data that you've got to prove the case where you can. And I guess, we were given the opportunity and the trust to do that. And after the first year, it was evident that, that had been a success. We saw that step change straight away in terms of that performance and the increase in the overall volume of applications. And therefore, for the second year and the third year, that conversation gets a little bit easier because you're then demonstrating the proof. But there's no sort of amazing shortcut to it. It's a lot of hard work from everyone across my team, across our agency network, to really sort of bring all of that together. With all of the sort of complexities about what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it, but to simplify that as much as possible so that, whoever we're talking to can really sort of understand all of it, and to make it as real as possible.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm going to dig into your agency and team structure in a second. But I think the army is kind of one of the original brands, with purpose. I don't think you had to go looking for it, did you? You're clear on who you are and what you stand for. Does that help when it comes to making a change like this?
I think it helps to a degree because I think, other organizations that have bolt on a purpose angle to their business tend to struggle with that sometimes. And also through the eyes of the people they're trying to talk to, can often run into difficulties about authenticity and the drivers behind that. The Army's always been incredibly clear about its purpose, as you say, and just having that as part of its makeup, it just makes the whole process for us much, much easier. Everyone knows that the Army does things around combat and is there to protect the nation both at home and abroad, but it's also the other things that the Army does in terms of its preventing conflict first and foremost, as well as responding to crisis and disasters, whether that's floods, fires, COVID, Ebola, and all of the humanitarian effort. It's been described as the nation's insurance policy in those kinds of situations, and it absolutely is. So from a marketing perspective, that's gold.
You've had very long-lasting and productive and award-winning relationships with your creative and media agency. And I wanted to ask you what the secret was to that longevity. How does that long-term investment on both sides help contribute to great work and the great results you've seen?
Yeah, and it's something that's really important to me, is having those long-standing relationships where we've built that over time. We've got sort of true partnerships in every sense of the word. It's not a client agency type relationship. We're all part of one team, essentially. And I think that's really important. We allow time and space for each agency to do the things that they are great at. We're very generous in the time that we afford to them to be able to do their jobs. And we're not, stepping on toes or trying to be overly fussy about managing that time, but we're working to a shared objective, some shared aims, very clear about how we want to achieve that. As with anything, there's always challenges, there's things that you need to overcome. And that's where those sort of moments of truth where you test the relationship out as you would with any other form of relationship. And I think that's where we get the real benefit of that time as well. And that sort of long-standing partnership that we have in place. When there are challenges, where there's things that we need to do or things that we need to react to, we come up with solutions, we move forward. There's very few times you fall out over these things at all. Yeah, there's been...
Not if you've got the right foundations. No, definitely not. And I love this idea of generosity that you talked about. I think that's a really lovely concept and one that I haven't really heard talked about so much in terms of agency relationships. I think it's great. And you talked about shared objectives also. Do you set those together on a yearly basis with your agencies?
We do. It's something we do at the strategic foundation for each year. So we bring all of that information together. We'll talk about that. We'll kind of make those objectives very clear. And we work together as a team to play to everyone's strengths in terms of how we're going to solve those problems and to meet the objectives that we've got to achieve commercially as well.
That seems like a very grown-up way of managing your agencies. I salute you on that because that's not always the case. And also, I think it's also important given that, and I can't think of another brand where this is the case, where every time you launch a campaign, it's in the news. And I don't just mean the marketing news. I mean the news, the real news. And I'm sure you don't set out to be deliberately provocative, although I'm sure there's a little bit of that. They are provocative. They are making news. And I'm just curious about, number one, do you deliberately design that in? And how do you plan for it? Because not everyone's, campaign is on national television or talk radio phone-ins. I mean, it must be it'd be nerve-wracking for me. I don't know how you do it.
It could be nerve-wracking for me too, depending on how long it goes on for. If it's day 2 and 3, then, that's maybe something a bit more to worry about. But do we design that in? What we do design in is that, again, from our approach and the need to kind of speak to a young generation, we need to have something new to say. I think we've spent a lot of time in really understanding the lives of our target audience. So if you're 17, 18, 19, etc., what's on your mind, what's important to you. And I guess by having an approach where we're trying to say something surprising about the army as well, something that's to a degree unexpected, standing for something as well puts you firmly in the spotlight for a reaction. So I think when you bring all of those factors together, we're trying to go beyond paid for media. Of course, we want to cut through to get attention. Our media budgets don't afford us, the ability to reach everyone that we want to talk to. So we always try and sort of build a platform where we can get into a bigger conversation, a bigger platform to be able to talk about army recruitment. And therefore, that is a deliberate approach. But having said that, some of that reaction can be really, I find it endlessly fascinating as well, that, people are sort of picking over the work and talking about it, as you say, on phone-ins and all that kind of thing.
Well, surely that's the definition of great marketing, is that people talk about it.
Well, the first role of marketing, of course, is to get noticed and to get that attention. Dave Trott said that 89% of advertising doesn't get noticed. So if we're doing that right, then we're doing our jobs hopefully right to that effect. But we need that real people to pay attention to what we're trying to say. And I think what we've also learned over time as well is something doesn't have to be universally liked to be successful. We're trying to appeal to people that would kind of see through that, if you like, as well. So for the people that do like it and are motivated or inspired to find out more, then that's the job that we're trying to do.
Not everything has to be universally appealed. I mean, I think that's what makes great marketing and certainly great comms, is that it appeals to the target audience and it's very focused and it creates a reaction. I think that's fantastic. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit and talk about your marketing ecosystem for a little bit. What are you responsible for at the Army in terms of channels and touch points, and how big's your team, and what kind of skills and capabilities do you have in the team?
So the team at the moment, it's not a huge team. It's about 17 people full time. It's a blend of skills and experiences. They're a fantastic team, firstly, to say as well. We're sort of organized at the moment mainly through skills and experience, but we're just going through an exercise at the moment to reorganize the team and to restructure that to be more closely aligned to the candidate journey and the roles that we need to fulfill along that candidate journey. So we're very much at the front end of that process in, raising awareness, driving consideration and conversion of people to come into the recruitment funnel, and into the process. So making sure that we're doing that with the right volume, in the right quality for all of the different role types and career streams that are available in the regular army and the reserve army. It's about 10 to 15,000 recruits a year that we're trying to put into those roles. And to do that, we need to generate somewhere north of 100,000 applications across all of the different streams and role types. And to do that as well, we make sure that we're providing a great experience at the front end as well to make it hopefully as frictionless as possible.
So what prompted this shift to a different organizational model for your marketing team? Because you've moved from I think you were more channel led, weren't you? And you had different teams, and now you're moving to this customer journey organizational design. What prompted that shift?
I think just a need that we can do things better. I think the channel approach worked for many years, but we just kind of realized that actually there's a better way of doing this. And sometimes, even for a small team, you can find yourself working in silos or missing opportunities or not fully being able to meet particular challenges. And I think that having just that sort of absolute focus on the customer and where they are in the process and being able to organize ourselves around them gives us a much greater opportunity to improve and to develop and to be more successful in that approach.
100%. You're not alone. There are many, many brands going through a very similar transformation, and one that makes perfect sense to be aligned around a customer, and a customer, buying journey makes perfect sense. Did you keep the machine going? Was marketing on full blast throughout the pandemic, or did you have to pull back?
No, marketing was on full blast throughout. So we were in a very fortunate position that we were able to continue recruiting throughout the pandemic. Yes, we had to shift and adjust and adapt as every other business had to as well. So whatever we could do virtually, we did virtually. We had to sort of change our process for certain things, but we could keep candidates coming through the recruitment pipeline at the right stages. Some we had to kind of keep them holding for certain lengths of time before they could go back into assessment centres. But we were able to keep the marketing lights.
So the machine was going. And media as well?
Absolutely.
Did you increase your media spend or keep it the same?
We kept media spend at our planned levels. And actually, because, for some of the months, we got the benefits for that where the cost of TV was cheaper for a few months. So we got the benefits from doing that as other advertisers sort of pulled back or pulled out altogether. We kept that budget fully in place for the duration. Of
Now you're seeing the results now, given that there's so many skills shortages and worker shortages at the moment. Are you feeling the effects of that? It's
a very competitive market out there, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think there's something like 1 million vacancies that are available at the moment. Yes, there's skill shortages up and down the country. And because we're also recruiting for part-time soldiers and officers as well in the Army Reserve, it's a difficult job at the moment. It's never been an easy task. Nothing has ever been straightforward in this whole Army recruitment world. But I think the market is going to be difficult for the foreseeable future. So we have to redouble our efforts. We have to make sure that, we are as bold and as brave as possible, making sure that our creativity is spot on, our messaging is spot on, our media is right, etc. We're in the right places, because we've got a brilliant offer. A role in the Army is like no other, really. And we think the Army's got a really strong message right now in particular as well. So if we can make sure that that's front and center of as many people's minds as possible, then hopefully we can overcome some of that stiff competition.
Amazing. It sounds like you've got your next round absolutely sorted and you have a great plan, and it's been a delight speaking to you. I'm practically ready to sign up now, Nick. You're a great front person for the Army. I think you're doing an amazing job.
Well, I can send you a link to our application form straight after this.
Anyone who knows me is killing themselves right now. Thank you so much for taking the time and kind of helping us understand more about what I think is a really great marketing story and really fascinating for one of the most iconic heritage brands this country has. And yes, I am calling it a brand. It's been a really great chat, and thank you so much for sharing the lessons, the trials and the tribulations.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for inviting me along.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Next Round. I hope you found it as interesting and informative as I did, and that you can take some insights and learning back to your own marketing. If you could rate and share this podcast, it would really help others to find these great stories. I'd also love to carry on the conversation and hear what you think, as we'll be sharing and chatting about this episode on LinkedIn and Twitter. The Next Round is brought to you by AAR, the experts in marketing ecosystems. At AAR, we are a multidisciplinary team of consultants who have strong and well-informed views on what brands need to do to overcome today's marketing challenges in order to better connect their businesses to their customers and drive growth. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.